let me get back to where we were a while back, because here's the problem. When you ask the question of where we're going, I believe those persons at the highest level of our government and other governments are now aware of the fact that Nibiru, Planet X, is on its way back in. And this is the fable. And by the way, I knew nothing at all. I knew a little smittens about it like everybody else. I had read a couple of stories 30 years ago or 40 years ago in Reader's Digest or Life magazine. Life is in Post magazine. Those magazines are not even in existence any longer. But they had thought they saw it, and maybe it was someplace and all this stuff. Somebody came to me when I was asking around, and I was saying, what in the world are they spending all of the American people's money on dried foods, bullets, machine guns, and all of that stuff, and going and underground and spending billions and billions for underground facilities? What's going on? And somebody quite simply said, oh, probably the fact that Planet X is on its way back in. And I said, what are you talking about? And then they said, had you ever read Sitchin's, a fellow named Sitchin, Zachariah Sitchin? You ever read his books about the Sumerian clay tablets and about Planet X and Nibiru coming back? And Nibiru means, by the way, in Sumerian, it means planet of the crossing, because it crosses our orbit. And I said, well, I know a little bit. And they said, well, you got to look at this and talk to this guy and talk to that guy and talk to these people over here that have been studying this thing for 20 years. And, read up on it. And then I got from a separate direction, somebody said, do you remember the Ronald Reagan speech on the floor of the United Nations when he freaked people out by saying, what if, would we get together with all the people of the world, all of our enemies, come together if we knew there was an extraterrestrial threat headed towards the Earth? Would we come together? And he said that on the floor of the United Nations in 1983, give or take.
What do you think about that? Is that legit, or is that just some kind of a lip service?
What his speech?
Yes, his comment. Yeah, I mean, what was the?
No, his comment is right, because another person had information came to me from other separate directions, and they said, it's about 1983 when Ronald Reagan was given the scientific verification that it was coming back, that Nibiru was on its way in. All right? Now, think about this now, timing and everything. That's 83. 87 was the Iran-Contra hearings. All right? Now, Reagan was still in at that time, or George Bush, whichever. George Bush, it's, like a second term for him because he was vice president with Ronald Reagan, right? And then just rolled into the presidency. All right? Now, during the Contra hearings, Senator Brooks from Texas, he asked Oliver North, he says, what is it that we have heard about executive orders planned to suspend the Constitution of the United States under the continuity government program? What's going on with that? And there, this thing was called Rex 84, Ready Emergency Exercise 84, 1984. Oliver North turned pale and almost fell off his seat. And Mr. Enuade from Hawaii was the chairman of the Contra hearings. He gavelled them down and said, we will now close and go behind closed doors for the rest of this. This is not to be talked about in public. Now, that's 87 on the floor of the Congress. That all took place. Matter of fact, interestingly enough, the day that took place was the same day that my toy company was brought up on the floor of the Congress at the same time. But that's a sidebar, just interesting for me. So here's what we have. Apparently, around 83 sometime, it became verified that it looked like that this was real and it was headed back in. What I have discovered is, first off, it was the cause of Noah's floods. The flooding of most of the land was from that. It was the cause of meteor showers back in the biblical time when, in fact, meteor showers came down and killed thousands of people, soldiers and people in the streets. They called it the stars fell from the earth, from the sky to the earth, and it was flaming rain and all of this stuff. All right, that was caused by the close passing of Nibiru. Nibiru is said to...
Let me jump in here.
Sure.
It's a good point for me to ask this question. I mean, is this, in your opinion, is this like the Anunnaki? I mean, what do you think that Nibiru is in your mind? Is this just a celestial body by chance that, you know, the fate of the world, you know, we're just happening to cross this thing just every so often, it's just the chance of everything in the universe? Or is there something more nefarious there? Is this thing you know, there's rumors out there it's a craft that's actually being piloted, you know, there's a whole lot of stuff.
I don't want to get, no, as far as I'm concerned, and now I ended up, see, once I got into it and I read some really brilliant, shocking things. For example, like I say, the Sitchin had gone over clay tablets. Sumerian clay tablets were like 4,000 years old, 3,000 years old, and read this story, and it included the arrival of this planet Nibiru, approximately 5 times the size of Earth in dimension. It has 4 or 5 moons, apparently, that travels with it, around it, kind of like its own little solar system. But it is the equal to, I like to compare it to, although it's a planet, it is a planet, big, or, you know, it's big, and it is a planet. And it is an extreme long, elongated orbital configuration. But I like to compare it to Halley's Comet, which comes around every 75 years, been logged in every 75 years, and they know when it's coming. And it came a little while back, zipped around the sun, and went back out again. But that's simply a comet. All right, and it's interesting to watch. Then they discovered in the 70s a thing called the Hale-Bopp comet, which had never been seen before. But then they saw it, and here it came, and it came around and then zipped around. It was bigger in size than the Halley comet, went around the sun and back out again. And then they said, well, if they did all the math and all the rest of that, that one is on a 4,200-year orbit. And it was, you know, so obviously with nobody around the last time that happened. Well, there was, but they weren't very well educated, so to speak, 4,200 years ago. But that's when it's going to come around again, according to science and astronomy and mathematicians. It came, and it will come again. All right. Now, I use that as an example because when I first heard about the potential of a 3,000-year orbit of Nibiru, I originally, not being an astronomer, I thought, wow, that's got to be nut stuff. You know, that's crazy. You know, the idea that something would go out and come around and be in a regular orbit that elongated to be going out 1,800 years and then back 1,800 years, you know. But then after that was when I discovered the information on Hale-Bopp being a 4,000. So it's a longer period of time. Okay, so I then got into a tremendous amount of research, finding everybody that was not in a mental institution that had really seriously looked into this. and knew what they were talking about. All right? And because the chances of Bob Fletcher putting his name on something like this was really slim, because I'm very well respected worldwide for doing very great internal exposés on what I've been doing. And for me to put my name on this, I had to really be convinced. So then I found out, son of a gun, in I'm not sure the exact date, in 1991 or something like that, this Dr. Sitchin, who had everybody throwing stones at him because he was giving people this extraordinary story about this thing coming back around, when the guy that was in charge of, now this is important, the head of the Naval Observatory for the United States of America, his name was Dr. Harrington. He called Sitchin and he said, I saw your stuff a while back and read it. By the way, the date was 1990, while I was running for Congress in Florida. He called Dr. Sitchin into his office. He said, I've been studying this for years, and I found it. You are right. There is a Planet X. There is a Nibiru. And I know where it is by its reaction by other planets and the reaction that's going on as we speak. I have found it, and I'm going to do a full report on that. By the way, that meeting between the two of them is on videotape, and I have it. All right, so, in other words, to verify it happened, the reason I say that is because Sitchin died, Dr. Harrington died very shortly after of cancer, fast-acting cancer, the same kind of a cancer that Ruby, the guy that killed Oswald, died of in prison. You know, he went in prison, he was fine, and then in a short time he died of cancer. All right, Richard Harrington, the head of the Naval Observatory, agreed with Sitchin. He had found it. He's dead. He's gone. There have been huge numbers of scientists, astronomers that have looked into this and have found it, or what they verified, that they're pretty positive of where it is, et cetera, that are dead. A lot of them. A whole bunch of them died in one gondola in Switzerland when the cable broke, and the whole bunch of them that had a meeting going about some of what we're talking about fell to their death in one big box. The gondolas, those things that go over top of the ski resorts on cables. Anyhow, there's been a lot of other people that have also been involved with this that have ended up dead. The only people that count are that might bother the bad guys are the people that might be of very high level, well-known, important personalities, and many of them have been killed when they have finally come around to realizing that this may be returning. Now, I looked also into the people that had done research. For years, we had people who've done their entire lives on trying to do legitimate research on this Nibiru. Now, what had happened is some of the best stuff is by Chinese. The Chinese, what we would call ancient astronomers in China that worked for the emperor in China. And if they made mistakes when they were studying the stars, he cut their heads off. So they were very cautious in terms of what they did. The Chinese astronomers back to antiquity have extreme records written about the dragon that flew across the sky, when it happened. They literally traced it and tracked it on one of its passes. They traced it for like 25 days and exactly where it was, et cetera, et cetera. Now, as you said, it's written in the Bible. It's called wormwood in the Bible. It is written in Revelations, the descriptions in Revelations. There are whole extreme amounts of biblical reports on this thing. There are reports of every one of the ancient cultures, including some of them where they scratched it on the wall of a cave, for crying out loud, or put it into the side of a religious building or something, all right, of what happened when the planet of the crossing comes back around, what happened the last time and what happens the next time. Now, to add to it, there was a discovery of a thing called a sky disk a while back, and that was actually done during the Bronze Age, and it could be dated. This is a 12-inch round bronze disc highlighted in gold. It shows the constellations, the sun and the moon, and what was, in fact, the passing of Nibiru during the daytime that did blocked off the sun for, I think it was 3 hours or something like that. And that old piece, because it has engraved in this bronze, done in gold on top of it, laminated in gold, was 3,600 years old. The dating done with modern astronomers and the brand new computer programs indicates all the way down, not only can they tell you the day that this was created, which would have probably been a short while after it had passed, because I believe it was actually a poured disk at that time. So it wouldn't have been, it's not like it was done that day, but it would have to have been within a month or two or something. But the new programs that astronomers have now, when you input the locations of the galaxies that are indicated on this disk in gold, where they're located to each other, it came out to even give it was the fact that it was done not only 3,600 years ago, but at 8:35 in the morning on a given day. So that's how accurate the new computerization is on astronomy information. Now, what I'm saying here is there's this whole unbelievable barrage of historic information on the return of Nibiru and how its effects are felt, et cetera, et cetera. So, again, I got into studying all of those and getting with several people that are, in fact, and have been studying this for years. There's two different thoughts on it, two groups of thoughts, both of them put together by groups that are should be respected, and put it that way. And one of them has been done by a group that's got into not only studying the Chinese, but the Bible in detail on where it describes these events. The feeling of one group is that it is on an elongated orbit, that it may be on our plane, what they call the plane of the ecliptic, which is reasonably flat, that all of our planets are on, give or take a couple million miles, I guess, up and down, left and right. But basically, it's fairly flat. Some people, one group feels that it's on that plane and will come in on that plane and go around the sun and back out. There are others that feel that it will be coming in from a 30-degree angularity off of our plane of the ecliptic, coming in on the same kind of an orbit, but coming in at 30 degrees off. This will affect maybe how long we would be affected and exactly when, etc. Now, according to this in-depth studies of the previous few passes where it had come by close enough to affect the Earth, and by the way, It's indicated on that disk that I mentioned. It's called the sky disk. Indicated on there is that the Earth shifted 26 degrees on its axis because of the location of the Orion constellation described on the disk. That would screw things up pretty seriously unto itself, the shifting of 26 degrees. The information in terms of date, the indication is that the most early close pass for Nibiru would be first seen next December. That would be the earliest possible time. It would be seen in the sky as a new star. It would be coming closer on a daily basis, and it would come to the closest point in the March and April of 5 months later. Okay, so you get the first visual December, January, February, and then March and April is when the poop would hit the fan.
Well, take us to that first day when that thing shows up in the sky. I mean, what's the powers that be? What's your game plan? What are you going to do when you see that thing show up?
Okay. Well, let me just make a couple of real crucial points on this whole thing. All right. And by the way, then the next point is the possibility of close pass would either be, if it was not next December, January, February, March, if it was not that period of time, that it would be the next year or the next year, all right? But the feeling is that according to all the information from the Chinese ancient writings, the biblical, and all of these ancient cultures that have written about it, it apparently all records what I said. In other words, seen in December and close March and April on all of the previous passes in antiquity writings. Okay? So that's where I'm going from with that. That's where these people that have studied all of that had said, apparently now, all things being measured, et cetera, that in fact it would be December, either this one or the next one after that, in terms of closest time and farthest away point in time.
Yeah, well,
farthest away point in time might be 6 years. Now,
how about this, though? I've heard you say before, though, and as a preemptive to this whole Nibiru thing coming around, that the government, I guess we could call it our American government, whatever we want to call it now at this point, because Nibiru to me leads me to believe I'm not even worried about the election. I don't care about Hillary or Jeb Bush. That's
right.
You know, I'm not even worried about that.
That's right.
But I've heard you, but no, hold on a second. I got a question for you.
Go ahead.
If we looking at this thing down the barrel, I've heard you state before read it somewhere that you said that martial law has got to be the preemptive thing to this whole thing. So can you go into that bit for us?
Yeah, absolutely. And that was the next thing I was getting to. You're 1 page ahead of me all day long here. Okay. So the point, and first off, see, for the people that say, well, and I'm not even go there. Let me just go the direction we're going. All right, there is no way that the corrupted government, who is ahead of us, they've got the infrared telescopes, they've got the planet, they've got satellites they've put up in the last 10, 15, 20 years. Headed out, going out, taking pictures way out there with infrared and shooting it back to them. We have no access to that whatsoever. Nothing. We don't even know what the moon looks like on the other side or any of that stuff, because the bottom line is, people say, well, how about NASA? Well, NASA is the United States government, and they're controlled by the corrupted persons at the highest levels. They don't want people to talk about it. Nobody's going to talk about it. They'll be killed if they talk about this stuff. What we're talking about here is the bottom line being that those corrupted persons that are better informed than we are because we don't have the equipment, they can never, ever announce to the world that there's something like this coming in. They can't do that. And if you just stop and think, just simply apply logic to it, okay, as soon as it's verifiable that something like this is coming through, that may, number one, we may pass through its tail twice. It would probably take 1 hour, according to the math on this thing, about 1 hour for us to pass through it the first time, 1 hour to pass through it when it goes on out, back out, coming around from the sun, from the back. All right? During that period of time, we would have meteor showers that you don't even want to try to describe on the face of the earth, period. We will have electronic interference, the potential of all electronics being shut down even a week before it gets at its closest point would be very likely, because it will, for one thing, it has already affected the sun, causing it to act crazy for about 2 years now. It's already affected livestock. How many millions of fish and birds and stuff in the last 2 or 3 years, and whales, have all died, and they couldn't figure out why? The bees, what's wrong with all the bees? They disappeared. It's got to do with gravity and magnetics and et cetera, et cetera. All right. The little deal, the little piece of microscopic directional thing that's in the head of a bee and in the head of a bird and in the head of a whale that's caused them all to run into brick walls and they didn't even know they were there. All right? So that's, I think, and many people agree with me, that's an effect already of Nibiru. The idea of telling the people cannot happen. Number one, you can't do that. I mean, you'd be completely insane. You have to use logic, like I said. People go completely crazy and berserk. I mean, on the entire globe, if they all of a sudden saw it. So, the bad guys, the elite handful that built underground hideouts and filled them with the food for themselves to have them finished last year and this year and a year or so back, all right? What's with their time schedule? What is with that? See? There's the people that say, oh, well, you don't have any idea really when, give or take 5, 10 years, blah, 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 blah. That may be. So then let's look at those guys. When are they building? And they got them done. They're ready, baby. If they needed them tomorrow, they could go in underground. So what they're going to have to do, they're going to have martial law. Now, I'm just talking America here now. They're going to have martial law control in the United States before it becomes visible. It may become visible, like I say, according to historic writings, it will be in December of one of the next few years. They'll have to have martial law in a few months ahead of that. And as I indicated in my DVD, they will utilize, we have to go back to those old plans of the 60s for world government when they said, what is it to make these moves on the people of the United States? It's got to be a serious threat. You can't go and do martial law unless you had, number one, the threat of a major war. Anybody paid attention to what's going on?
Bob?
Okay, still there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, fine. I heard a click. I thought I lost. Okay, you have to have something like the threat of a major world war, like with Russia, and we see what's been going on. It's going in a bad direction. Put that aside. Number two, how about if you had something like some terrible disease epidemic? What happened this year? We had Ebola come up on the horizon, didn't we? We don't know where that's at now. That's hanging in suspended animation, right? So we have those types of elements, it's going to have to be something that severe. How about just general strife, like some kind of a blacks against whites race war thing?
Oh man, that's coming down the pike.
Oh,
I mean, you can
son
see
of a
that
gun!
there.
How about that? See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Now you have to understand. I put this together. I've been working on this for 3 years. I put all of that into the DVD before half of that was taking place. I didn't know anything. I didn't know the Russians were going to come into the Ukraine. I didn't know that was going to happen. I didn't know about Ebola, that was going to be almost an epidemic. See, they kind of did a little test run with some of that stuff to see what would happen to the public. And also, now the last one, we have ISIS, right? Oh, no, that's not the last one, but it almost is. We have that ISIS group over there cutting people's heads off. If they started showing up in 7 or 8 different states in our country here, and were really pumped up, and people were scared to go to work, that would be good for martial law. And now the newest one, what do we have? North Korea. By the way, in case people that missed this, not only did North Korea hack in to the Sony corporation and threaten to kill anybody that went to the theaters to watch that goofy movie about the dear leader, right? Okay, but what they did was they actually cracked into our nuclear power plants.
Wow.
Did you hear that?
Yeah, I did. I heard that. A
lot of people didn't pay attention to that.
Yeah. Well,
the North Koreans were able to punch into the operational computer system of our nuclear power plants. They could.
Hey, Bob, one of the things I really want to talk to you about, here on the Weekend Conspiracy, we take a different approach. We talk about some serious, man. You've given us some heavy stuff. It's almost too much to comprehend. But I wanted to go back a little bit to your previous history as a promotional manager in the music business. And one of the things I've always found interesting, and I heard this story again last week here in South Carolina, one of our sons of South Carolina is the great James Brown. Oh, that guy. And I've heard stories about, Anita Franklin, back as late as 10 years ago, showing up Aretha Franklin, showing up to a concert venue, and before the concert began, that before they went on the stage, they had to be counted out like $50,000 in cash because they've been screwed over so many times over the years. And I think that's such indicative of the new world order and the system we live in. Is there any truth to that, where these old school, classic rock and roll,
whether they required prepayment?
Yeah, like I'm talking like cash payment, not like a had to have cash in a bag.
Well, going way back to when I was involved. As a matter of fact, I for a short time promoted James Brown stuff. But the bottom line being that see, there's a lot of promoters that have screwed people around. Period. They just never got paid. They got a down payment, they got a contract, and these people would be incorporated. They pay part of what they're going to pay them. Guys go in, they do their entire shows, they do everything, and the guy says, "I didn't make enough money. Sorry about that," and file bankruptcy the next week, and the performers never get paid. So if the question is, do these people, and have they periodically demanded payment and cash because they don't know next day if the check's going to be good? Absolutely, that is, of course, the truth. Now, I can't speak for any individual situations, but whatever. That's absolutely that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And by the way, sometime if you want to have a great, more relaxed program, I'll come back on and we'll talk some music stuff. I'll give you some stories in the music industry that occur. And I must also add, my one son has for over 30 years managed one of the biggest recording studios in the world. He is still there and has recorded everybody.
Oh my gosh!
And he's still there.
That's just what I wanted to hear. You're on the Weekend Conspiracy. We broadcast worldwide on the Hillbilly Radio Network. And when I've heard you for years on Alex Jones, Coast to Coast. I mean, you've got the links on your website. I've linked to your website on the Weekend Conspiracy. And I didn't know this about you until earlier this week when I was researching the interview a little bit. When you were talking about Loretta Lynn and Conway Twitty, as a hillbilly, man, I mean, that's just, they are gods to us hillbillies. And I just
I'll tell you what, both of them are great people. And my position was, I was the promotion manager for MCA for a few years, and then I opened up my own record company. And I also had done that for Mercury Records and ABC Distribution, ABC Records, and a couple others I haven't even remembered now. But these were the greatest. It was the greatest time and the greatest performers. And I was the manager director for the entire Southeast. I was in your backyard. I had 4 offices, one in Miami, one in Nashville, one in Memphis, one in New Orleans, and one in Atlanta, Georgia.
All right. So you're setting me up here. I'm going to let you go after this.
Okay.
And this is the finality of this thing. And I just want you to give me an honest opinion, okay, of this. Hold on. Just give me 1 second here. Here we go. We're going to get it started right here. I'm going to give you the best I've got. And just let me know, thumbs up or thumbs down. I don't need a lot of, critique because it may hurt my personal, view of myself. So here we go. Night moon was drifting through the lazy sway of trees. I saw the look in your eyes, looking into the night, not seeing what you wanted to see. Darling, don't say a word. I've already heard what your body's saying to me.
What you need to do is keep doing all you can on the radio, and don't go past that. You'd be all right. And stay away from the Jack Daniels.
Mr. Fletcher, sir.
Okay, now let me sum this up.
Yes,
all right? And where are we on time? Are we done, or are we good? What do you got?
No, we got a little bit of time left. Carry on, sir.
Okay. All right, here's the bottom line. I went into this when the Nibiru thing came in front of my face. I was extremely skeptical. I just said, "Whoa, wait a minute!" But then at the same time, I'm saying to myself, Why did they stop with the New World Order, one world government push? Why have they stolen all the money and gone underground into these holes with this thing? And why is the rest of the major nations doing the same thing? It's got to be something way out of our control. It's not a war. It's something coming from someplace. And that was when the Nibiru popped up in front of me, and then I studied that. I am convinced, without a doubt. Now, it's very difficult. No, I don't have a crystal ball. None of the people that are studying this have a crystal ball. And to try to say, I'm going to tell you exactly when it is going to be here and be a problem, I can't do it, and none of them will do it, and they shouldn't. I leave the door open, but my feeling is that there is no doubt that this is what has scared these people. See, even the Pope's involved. The Pope and the Vatican, a few years back, cut a special deal with the United States and built an infrared telescope, a heavy-duty scope in the United States, owned by the Vatican. So the Vatican knows about it as well, and it's aimed out in the direction that it would appropriately have to be aimed out. In terms of destruction, it will really do a number. It'll wash all of the waves just like it did during the Noah's floods. The difference of the gravitational effect, by the way, and I have to add another line that I hadn't even thought about, but the bottom line is I do believe that it is on its way back. They know it. They're preparing. They have spent multi-millions on equipment into the local police departments around the United States. That includes troop carriers, hand grenade launching equipment. Every military type of equipment you could imagine is in the United States police forces. Why are they doing that? They're doing that because when the poop really hits the fan, they are going to have riots out of control. Those guys are going to be still up on the top, swinging whatever they have to their billy clubs and water guns and launching grenades and everything else with their new equipment, while the elite get their tails down into their cubby holes underground. They have bought enough weapons and bullets under the rangers, the forest rangers, and the Internal Revenue Service and the National CDC. They bought millions and thousands of rounds of bullets, enough for 3 wars, under those titles. Why are they doing that, folks? Why are they underground? Why are they building those? Why are they spending millions and billions in the foods and putting them under the ground? They're putting them underground last year, last month, and this week. They're not doing it 5 years from now. That's the scary part.
Yeah, amen to that.
That's the reality.
I mean, there's no doubt about that, Bob Fletcher. I advise,
that's the reality.
I advise all of our listeners out there to go to BobFletcherInvestigations.com. Check out the video he's got for sale out there, Incoming Nibiru, and he's got multiple others out there about the drug thing, the cartel, and all that. We've talked about this so much. Hey, sir, you've been so kind with your time, and I really appreciate it. And God bless you, and have a great night. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thanks a lot, and we'll get back and talk about fantastic music stories.
Oh,
sometime.
man, I look forward to that. I'm going to have another song under my belt by that point. I'll practice a little bit more,
But, okay, God bless everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Have a good night.